Hey everyone. Oh, just... Hey everyone, welcome to Victory Condition Gaming. My name is Doug. Today on the show, we are talking all about Forbidden Lands and the new Kickstarter that's on right now for the Bitter Reach, which if you haven't checked it out, please check out the link in the description of this video, and hopefully you'll be as interested in it as I am. I'm very excited about this project. Joining me today are two of my favorite people on the planet. I'm just going to say right now, two of my favorite people. We have Dave from the Effect Podcast, and we also have Tomas Härenstam from Fria Ligan Publishing. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on and giving me part of your Sunday afternoon or evening, I guess probably it is over there, for being on the show and chatting with me for a little while.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.
Always delighted. We'll always come along if we get the invite, Doug.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. Now, one thing before we start, there are a couple things that I would like folks to do if you haven't already. First thing to do is, of course, check out the Kickstarter in the link below. And the second thing I would like you to do is, if you are tuning in for the very first time, please hit that subscribe button, and that helps us grow as a show. And also, it kind of helps all the content that we create get a little more notice on YouTube. And also hit the like button down below if you are a fan of Fria Ligan Publishing, because we want this video to show up in search results and all that stuff on the YouTube analytics, because Fria Ligan is just putting out some great products, and we want more and more folks to see all the cool RPGs and books that they're putting out. So without further ado, let's just go right into introductions. Let's start with the man behind Fria Ligan Publishing, Tomas Härenstam. Tomas, you want to introduce yourself for folks that maybe haven't met you before or haven't seen you on the dozens of times that you've been on this show already?
Yeah, I've been on a couple of times, haven't I? Yeah, I'm Tomas. I'm just one of the people behind Fria Ligan. We started out as 4. Now we're actually up to 8.
Wow.
Like core members. We're growing. And a lot of awesome freelancers, of course. But yeah, we've been doing this since, officially since 2011. So it's going on like 8 years now. And yeah, we're busy.
Very good. You've got some great products that we've been able to feature on the show, and everybody should check out all the cool stuff that they're putting out. Dave, why don't you tell everybody about your awesome podcast you and Matt do? That if you haven't checked out the Effect Podcast, everybody needs to be listening to it, because it's a phenomenal podcast. Anyway, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. So I'm Dave from the Effect Podcast with my co-host Matthew. We've been going for nearly 2.5 years now on that podcast, with discussions about Tomas's games. So the more Thomas does, the more we get to talk about it. But yeah, check it out. Come along and have a listen if you haven't before. It's not all about Tomas.
But thankfully, thank God. Yeah.
But we do obviously focus a lot on Fria Ligan's games because they are so damn good.
Absolutely, yeah, they're just phenomenal. The one thing I will let folks know, if you're tuning in and you're watching this live, if you have any questions for Tomas or for Dave, for that matter, I guess maybe, I don't know, feel free to put them in the comments below, and we'll address them as we can, or we'll just wait until the end of this session and try to answer them if we have time. All right, so Tomas, you have a new Kickstarter for the Bitter Reach, a new campaign book for Forbidden Lands. Before we get into that, let's it's funded in minutes, so you have to be excited about that. I mean, this is just one of just many different things that successful things for this line that you've been able to make happen. Yeah, you're just killing it with this Forbidden Lands RPG.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, it's only been out since we actually launched it in December last year, so it's not even a year old, Forbidden Lands as a game. But then it's been fantastic to see it grow, and so I mean, after the launch in December, we had a smaller book out in the spring, and then of course we we're lucky enough to get some awards during the summer, some Ennies and the UK Game
Yeah.
Expo Award. So we're really happy about that. And we've been working on this expansion for a long time, actually. It's been in the works since before we launched the core game. So now we just thought it's time. So we need to sort of we this game is catching on, and we want to make sure we give players more content, more stuff to do, and we thought we need to push this the bit of reach and get a Kickstarter out. So it's all coming together now, and it's a lot of fun to see that people are responding really well to it.
Absolutely. You've won this game has won UK Games Expo RPG of was the best RPG for last year, or for this year, I guess is 2019.
Yeah, I guess.
And then you won.
He's got so many awards. He just doesn't know what they're for now.
You got two gold Ennies for this one, and a silver one.
Yeah, that's right. We got silver Ennies for best rules and product of the year, and gold Ennies for cartography and what was the other one? Production values.
Yeah,
and those two are really. I mean, I think those are really. I'm happy about those. I'm happy about all of them, but because of both of them. The cartography, it's a guy the main guy who does the maps is his name is Tobias Tranell. He does the big world map, and then there's another guy who does the sort of adventure site maps, Nicholas Brandt. And they both do amazing work. So I think it's really well deserved, this award for them. And also production values. I mean, that's always, and it's fun to see that, because Forbidden Lands as a game, of course, the content is always comes first, but also just the presentation is something that we worked a lot on for this game. The fact that you get this boxed set with a map, and the 2 books with the faux leather covers, and all of that stuff was really a big part of this game, to get that feel, not only through the content and the art, but also through the actual physical stuff that you hold in your hands. And we're happy that came through and people responded to it.
I luckily I've had copies of freely published of Forbidden Lands on at different conventions, and I've shown the box set to various folks, and it's just amazing. You open it. I usually have my copy there. I open it up and I'm like, look at this set. Look at this box set. It's phenomenal. And they'll pick up the books and they're like, oh my word, this is crazy. Like, how much is this? Has got to be like $100. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's like really, like, I think it retails for like $40-$50 here in the States. Yeah. And it's like, they're just astounded by the amount of the quality of everything that's in that box set, and I've got several stores that they're just amazed by the product, and I'm so glad to see that a few of them have hopped onto this Kickstarter, which is really great.
Yeah, that's something we also tried to do this time, because we're working on, I mean, we have done a number of Kickstarters and they've done fairly well, but now an area where we feel we want to do more is retailers. So we actually have an outreach program for retailers right now, but I've been trying to get in touch with retailers all over the world, basically, to get a closer relationship with them, let them know about us and our games. And also in this Kickstarter, we actually have retailer reward levels that are only for retailers. And that's kind of a new thing that we're trying out. Still not that many pledges or anything, but it's something. And it's a chance for retailers that want to get to know us more personally and get our games directly from us to do that via this Kickstarter. So it's a bit of an experiment that we're doing.
Absolutely, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a part of a few Kickstarter retailer backer groups on Facebook, and there's always folks that launch Kickstarters that don't quite understand margins for retailers and all that. When they launch a Kickstarter, your pledge levels for retailers are amazing. Like, I'm just going to say right now, like, I've shown it to quite a few retailers, and they're just like, I gotta stock this. This is just you're giving them a great margin. You're giving them free shipping. Like, they're just usually they're just stunned by those pledge levels, which is great to see and great to hear that you guys understand that.
Yeah, I mean, Kickstarter is all. I mean, Kickstarters are of course amazing, but retailers remain really important, and not only to sort of sell games, but also to demo games and to sort of show them off and to get a bigger presence in game stores all over the world is something that we're really working on right now.
Very cool. Very cool. So not only is this campaign a Kickstarter for the Bitter Reach, which is a second campaign book, it's also a Kickstarter for a second printing of Forbidden Lands, because the first printing sold out.
Yeah, that's true. It's that kind of a dual thing. It's the core game is sold out, which is a bit of a problem always. I mean, we'd wish we'd have been faster in reprinting, because now there's always a bit of a lag. It takes some time to print books and ship them and everything. So hopefully, about a month from now, we should have the games back in print in stores and for backers again. And as you said, apart from the reprint, what we're doing is the Bitter Reach, which is a campaign book that expands the world. I mean, the way the Forbidden Lands works, it's got this map and a world, and it's a hex crawl. It's a sandbox game, and also it's designed in a way that basically that map is contained. There are large mountains on all sides, and there is an ocean on one side. So you kind of contained in that area, and that's the idea, is to keep you can go wherever you want, but you're staying in this very large but still confined area. So what we're doing with the Bitter Reach is basically adding a whole new map, a whole new world to explore. It kind of tags on to the previous one. It's up north, so just directly due north of the Forbidden Lands, you have the Bitter Reach, which is a pretty big area, a vast expanse of frozen tundra and glaciers that you can explore, of the same size as the world in the base game. And that's kind of how we want to approach expansions for Forbidden Lands, is that we're with these major expansions, there'll be smaller ones as well, but the big ones, they will each have a big map that expands the setting. So this one is north, next one will probably be west, and then so they kind of build a bigger and bigger patch world of these maps that sort of expands the world one map at a time.
I love it. I love it. Actually, we've got a question about maps in the chat from Ibram. It says, about maps, are all expansion maps going to go for similar geographical, quote unquote, out of bounds lines? It felt thematic for Ravenland, but it could be distracting for the outer areas.
You mean to have them with these kinds of boundaries, or that you're sort of, we'll see. They might not all be that. I mean, the Forbidden Lands, the original one, there is a backstory that explains why this area is isolated, and hence the Forbidden Lands, because it's cursed by a demon king that rules there, and he's been sort of shut in. So there's a reason for the isolation. And for the Bitter Reach, there is a different backstory, but it's not the case that every map will be exactly the same and sort of blocked off in this manner. No, that might not be the case in every expansion.
Now I wonder though. I take it it's a good question.
Yeah.
But that guy must be really lucky to play an awful lot if he's running out of space in already.
Very true. Very true.
Good on him. But so was the Bitter Reach, Thomas, always intended to be this sort of icy tundra location, or so have you got it all planned out where the other?
I mean that was always the idea, and it always made sense to go to have that theme. We also wanted to do an sort of icy tundra area, and it made sense to have that up north, of course. And it's kind of interesting that there was a really famous Swedish campaign module in the 80s that was called Svavelvinter, the kind of the Winter of Brimstone or something like that. That was written for the main fantasy RPG back then, Drakar Demoner. That was written by Erik Granström, who's the guy who wrote Raven's Purge and the backstory for Forbidden Lands. And I really love that one. So this new one for the Bitter Reach is also a bit of a sort of like an homage to that thing, and that also had that tundra and feel and that kind of an environment. I think that's really cool kind of way to play in a cool setting. So that was always the idea, to have that kind of environment in the expansion that goes up north. Then we have some other ideas for going in the other directions, but for the northern one, this was always the plan.
Yeah, Matthew and I were talking to Magnus Theatre the other day. We're lucky enough to get an interview with him. And he was talking about a scenario he did called Secrets of the Winter Woods.
Yeah,
which was a Draka Octomona sort of launch scenario. I think he described it as.
I think so. Yeah.
Which he was suggesting that might have been a reason why. Inspiration for having him involved in the project.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, he's the main writer of the Bitter Reach, and he's a veteran RPG writer in Sweden. He's been around since I think he started out late 80s, maybe. So he's been around. He's done a lot of work. He's very experienced, and yeah, he did that one that you mentioned. That was definitely one of the reasons that we approached him for this project. I mean, for the core game, I mean, I did the rules design and the sort of general project management. Whereas Eric Granström did the setting, the lore, and also wrote the Raven's Purge. And we'll be continuing to work with Eric as well for the next expansion. Will probably be written by him. But we felt that for both, because we need probably more than one person writing these things, and also we wanted a couple of different perspectives on it. That's why we brought on Magnus. So that's kind of the idea that now Magnus is doing this one, Eric will do the next one, and then we'll see who does the one after that. And between that, we also bring in, like we did with the Spyro Quetzal, which was like a smaller module that was basically stretch goals from the first Kickstarter, where we invited some really cool, really up-and-coming RPG writers, mainly from the US, but also from the UK, to write stuff, like one adventure site each for the Forbidden Lands, a much smaller piece of work, but still. And we're doing that again now. So we're bringing in some really cool writers who do these more smaller expansions and smaller adventure sites, because that's something we want to do with this game. Forbidden Lands is, it does have a vision, but it's also a pretty big tent. We want to bring in a lot of different ideas and perspectives on it to make it really be more than one person's vision of a game.
Yeah, cool.
Dave, you mentioned when we were talking back and forth before this session, one of the stretch goal writers was someone that you were kind of curious as to how they got involved with Thomas. I'm trying to remember which one it was.
No, well, I was talking about Magnus, but also interesting that you got authors like Fiona Meave Geist now involved because of the stretch goals, and then David McGrogan. Some names that might not be familiar to everybody out there, but in the RPG world and the sort of fantasy writing world, then are clearly some pretty big names you're pulling in.
Yeah, and that's really cool. I mean, that's something that we did the last time with different names, but we felt that was a great way to get their perspective on Forbidden Lands. And I mean, we sort of reach out to people who we think do amazing work, and have them on to do something for Forbidden Lands just feels great. So yeah, I mean, for Fiona, we played quite a bit of Mothership over at the office, and so that's sort of where that came from. And then yeah, so and it's primarily actually not me, but my partner in crime, Nils, who's sort of he's sort of in touch with that crowd more than I am. So he's the one who's actually been approaching these people. So the details for how that actually happened were probably he could probably answer that better than me. But I'm just really happy that they're on board and doing this.
Absolutely.
No, I think it's a great idea to, like you say, to spread that sort of creativity. And it's I think one thing I really like about it is it shows kind of how unprecious you are about controlling the content completely. You're keen to have other voices in. You could easily see that something as good and special as Forbidden Lands, you might be very protective of it. I guess you probably are very protective of it, but bringing in lots of other writers is a great step, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's we are protective of it to a point and to certain parts. I mean, I think that's something that always is something you have to work through. And that's, I mean, we have a strong vision for how this game is played, how it works, and of course, guest writers will have to sort of explain to them how this world comes together, so that what they're doing actually kind of makes sense in the world and also works mechanically as it should. I mean, that's one of the things with Forbidden Lands. It does not really have conventional scenarios as such. It's not a game where you get a quest and you go and do the quest and then you come back to the quest giver and claim your reward. It doesn't really work like that. It's much more of a sandbox game where you go where you want to go. You probably won't get anyone to ask you to go to do any. Well, you could, but that's not really the point of the game. So you have, instead of scenarios, you have these adventure sites, and they are much more open world. You can sort of approach them. They're a scenario location that you can approach in many different ways and from any number of different directions. And that's, of course, if someone wants to write for Forbidden Lands, they kind of have to grasp that concept and see how an adventure site for Forbidden Lands actually is composed. So there we're quite strict on how is an adventure site in Forbidden Lands built up, which kind of headlines need to be there, what kind of information need to be there, in what order, and so on. There we're kind of strict, but where it comes to the more of the content end, we think it's really cool to leave, to open it up to the imaginations of more than one or just a few people, and to get other people to feed into this world. So it's kind of a combination of being strict and letting other people contribute with their amazing ideas.
Yeah, I love the format of the Raven's Purge campaign book. I just think it's genius how it all works together, and it's always fun showing folks like, look, this is the way the campaign book works, and look at all these adventure sites, and they each have like a little map, and you can kind of play them all as one shots, but they all tie together. I always geek out whenever I'm showing them.
It was interesting in the conversation with Magnus. We were talking about the Hollows adventure site in Forbidden Lands. And in the campaign that I'm playing in, we spent one scenario there. We basically robbed it of whatever money we could find, and then we ran.
Yeah.
In Magnus's campaign, he couldn't get them out of the Hollows.
I heard that. Yeah.
7 scenarios, and they were still there.
Yeah, that's just, they're not doing it right. You shouldn't stay around in a single village for a long time. That's not what this game is about. I have to talk to them. Yeah. No, and actually I heard he's not the only one, because the Hollows, it's a cool little village, but it was never intended to be like a 10-session campaign set in that single village. That was never the idea. But hey, it's always interesting to see what people do with people. Always surprised by that.
So with the Bitter Reach, we've got a question in the chat from Matthias. He says, are any new kin in the Bitter Reach, or any changes to old ones?
Yeah, we have discussed it. There is nothing on there right now of the stretch goals that we do have. I did see a number of good ideas for new kin, but we haven't added any new right now. So we'll have to see what we do. I mean, adding new kin usually would be more like versions of the existing kin more than completely new ones, I would guess. Like the orcs. The orcs in the Bitter Reach have a different backstory and a different history than the orcs in the Forbidden Lands, because they've been sort of isolated from each other. So they're quite different. So that they're kind of a variety of the kin in the Forbidden Lands. But as for adding completely new ones, we'll see. Maybe.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a yes or a no, was it?
Not really. No,
that wasn't.
That's very definitely done, though. I thought,
I mean, there is room. I mean, there is no obvious. I mean, we haven't scoped any new kin as per now, but there's always room to add stuff to Forbidden Lands, which is kind of the point of how this game is built. That there is room to keep building it piece by piece.
Sure. So one thing that you added to this Forbidden Lands line that wasn't in the previous Kickstarter is this cloth map, which everybody seemed to be really, really excited about when you launched this Kickstarter. I think you actually had to go back and figure out how to add more of these to folks to be able to back. Can you tell us a little bit about this cloth map? Because I mean, part of the whole legacy aspect of Forbidden Lands is you put stickers on it. So once I saw it, I was like, that's kind of an interesting item.
That's odd. Yeah.
No, I mean, but it works. It works though.
No, I mean, it's I mean, because you still need, probably when you actually play at the table and using the stickers and all of that, you probably use the paper map, not the cloth one. Well, right. I guess you could use the cloth one, but that's not kind of the idea. A nice cat there.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about mine because she's been whinging to let me let out.
I have 3 of them here, but I closed the door so they wouldn't get in. Anyway, so this is an idea that came up where we figured, what can we do? What kind of nice extra stuff can we do for this campaign? And cloth map is something we've been talking about for some time. So yeah, I mean, primarily it's because those maps, I think Tobias Tronell's maps are so cool that doing something special with them, like printing them like a nice cloth and doing an artifact of them like that, is something that made sense. So yeah, and then you're right. They were limited at first to a specific reward level, but then that one ran out. But what we did was that we added them as add-ons. You can get the cloth maps if you want to. Anyway, there are other things. There is in that limited reward level that we are not adding as add-ons. So it's still limited. There is an art print and so on that is still limited. But the cloth maps you can get as add-ons. Yeah,
it's and you can get the previous map and this map, which is awesome. Definitely going to pick up both of those.
Yeah, me too. I was very disappointed to have missed out on the limited version because I couldn't get those.
Let's see here. Phil has a question. Let's see here. Phil says, "Is there a narrative support built in for starting your campaign in the Bitter Reach, or having your starting characters as Frost Druids, champions, etc.?"
Yeah, good question. There's a couple of different ways to approach the Bitter Reach. You can, I mean, I guess the sort of default way is that you will have been playing for quite some time in the Forbidden Lands, and then you move to the Bitter Reach. And then there are a couple of different ways to actually do that, since the Forbidden Lands is actually isolated. It's not that it's easy to leave. But there are some ways. There are some hidden ways to traverse the mountains to the north and actually enter the Bitter Reach. There's going to be ways in the book that kind of describe why you would want to do that, and kind of set things in motion and give the players a reason to go there. But you can also play a completely new campaign that starts off in the Bitter Reach, and then you're not necessarily adventurers from the Forbidden Lands. You can be treasure hunters from other areas. You can actually be natives to the Bitter Reach. There are different couple of ways to enter the campaign. So yeah, and those will all be described in the book. So it's going to be a variety of options on how to start your campaign.
Excellent.
It's an interesting sort of take on the feel of Bitter Reach as opposed to Forbidden Lands, because talking about you could start your campaign as a native of the Bitter Reach, which kind of implies that there is something there already. So as a native, you'll know what the next village is and that kind of stuff potentially. There's an interesting comment that Magnus made about as a writer getting his head around the idea that you've got to keep it sandbox and open, and he referenced a conversation he had with you about having one location in the Bitter Reach that was a set place. Which is on the coast. So do you think how do you think that'll make Bitter Reach different to Forbidden Lands?
Yeah, that's true. And when I say natives, it's probably the way the Bitter Reach is. There is a bit of if you want to read up, there's a backstory. Anyone who's listening to this, there is quite a bit of backstory on the Kickstarter. But in short, this land has been covered by ice and snow for thousands of years, and only recently the ice has started to melt and reveal strange ruins and remnants from an earlier civilization under the ice. And that has kind of triggered a treasure hunt, like a gold rush, not from the Forbidden Lands, but from the older land, which is actually even further south. So basically, these people come with boats and ships up to this northern land. So, and they have been doing this for some time. So when I say native, it's probably people, it's mainly these kinds of treasure hunters who are also fairly new to the land.
Right.
You could probably play one of these orcs that have always lived there, and then you would know the land a bit more. But the default way to play is that you would be fairly new to this land, just like in the Forbidden Lands, which has been covered by the blood mist, and when that's gone, that kind of opens up for exploration. Here, it's more of the situation that most people have come here recently and are exploring this land from the coast in. So there is definitely the same kind of sense of exploration, that you will not necessarily know exactly know the land that well. And yeah, you're right. There is one place, one small, like an outpost, like a settlement on the coast that we will determine where it is, because in general, adventure sites can be placed wherever the GM wants, and that's kind of the way that this game is built up. That you can, it's quite modular. You can place these adventure sites in different locations on the map depending on where your players feel like going and so on. But this particular place will have a definite location on the map, and that would be more like a starting point for that campaign. So in that sense, it's a bit different. Yeah.
Cool.
Let's talk a little bit about we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but the shipping situation is a little bit different with this Kickstarter, in the fact that since you are funding a second print of the core set and this new campaign book, folks that want to pick up everything, they can get the shipping in 2 waves. They can get started playing right away. Is that, if I'm not mistaken, Thomas?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was the kind of the dilemma here, that since obviously we wanted to get people a chance to get the new print of the core game as a part of this Kickstarter, and also the Bitter Reach. But the problem is that we don't want to keep people waiting, because the Bitter Reach we're planning on to ship in February, but it would kind of be a shame if everyone had to wait until February to get the core game. Right. So now what we're doing is that we're adding the option, if you want to, if you're getting the Bitter Reach and the core game, as well as other previous products, there is like a GM screen and custom dice and stuff. And if we want to get that stuff, you can have that shipped to you early. So you'll get that late October, early November, somewhere around there. So you have the choice, and that choice will be made in a pledge manager, which will start after the campaign is over. And that's just to give people who want to get started the chance to do that early and not wait until February.
I'm just thinking of it as like, it's a great holiday present. So folks can give it for the holidays, and it gets you building your Forbidden Lands communities and your gaming group in advance, so then that way they're all familiar, so they can dive right into Bitter Reach here at the beginning of next year. Let's see. There's some comments here. Let me. Krister says the Symbaroum cloth map is the centerpiece of all of their games. It's just lovely, and he's very excited to see the Forbidden Lands. Is it going to be a similar? Is it a similar product as the?
We're actually discussing right now with the printer and exactly what kind of cloth to use and the exact size, because it will be at least the same size as the paper map, which is pretty big. And hopefully will be even bigger than that. But then we're also discussing what exact cloth to make. I want to have like a thick, nice canvas type cloth, but that we're getting samples this week, and we'll see exactly. But it's going to be a nice and thick and chunky map for sure.
Nice. Let's see. Andre says, if I get the new print in Raven's Purge, does the add-on come with the first shipping? So I'm wondering, is he? I think he's asking if he gets the core rule book or the core set and adds Raven's Purge,
right?
And all that. Does it do all?
Yeah,
those
all of that stuff, all of the new print, and all of the other existing products like Raven's Purge, Spyro Quetzal, GM Screen, dice set, and the card deck. All of that stuff will be shipped in the first wave. If you want a first wave, it'll all come together. The only thing that you'll need to wait for is the actual Bitter Reach book itself.
Excellent. Let's see here. Matthias also asks, he says, I know it is expensive, but are there any plans to have new cards for the Bitter Reach? That's a good question.
Well, that is a good question. Actually, we're looking at it right now. One option that we might do, and that is, it could be that we add more in the core game or in the card deck. There are like 10 cards for mounts, and I love those because they're not actually there. They're only in the cards. They're actually not in the book. But there's like 10. There's horses and wolves and some other mounts, and they all have like a picture and a name and a little bit of personality and their own stats. So it's like not just a horse. It's actually that horse with that name and that kind of personality, and that's something we want, that gives a nice flavor to the game. And so we're discussing now whether to do that for the Bitter Reach as well, because up there you might imagine that mounts would be a bit different. horses are not that common. There could be more wolves. There could be rams. There could be different things, different mounts. So we might do that. And if we do that, it would be cool to have those on cards as well. So it's something we're thinking about, but no solid promises just yet.
Sure. One question I've seen quite a bit in the Kickstarter comments. There's some errata and changes to the core rulebook from the first printing. Are those changes going to be implemented with the second printing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's kind of why we did them. There's a few, mostly clarifications, very few changes of the rules. There's some where we felt we needed to tweak something a little bit. And that was when we needed to do a second printing. We just went back, looked at all the comments, everything that we ourselves have discovered, and just made a big list and went through it all and implemented those changes, mostly just clarifications in the rules where something was not explained in the clearest possible way, but also some minor changes, like the way willpower points work for NPCs. That's probably the biggest change. And those don't change the game in any major way, but there are some things worth bringing up, and that's why we made those changes in the second printing. And we also made a PDF, Errata PDF, for that everyone who has the first printing of the book can download. It's just 2 pages. And also the second printing will have those changes implemented. Yeah.
Nice. We have a question that says, will there be new artifacts in the Bitter Reach book?
Yeah, I mentioned mounts, and artifacts is the other one that we're discussing in pretty much the same kind of way. There will most likely be a number of new artifacts, and if we can, we'd like to do cards for them as well. The thing we need to figure out how to do is that if I mean, the card deck is like 50, 60 cards, and for the Bitter Reach, it might just be like 20 cards, like 10 mounts and 10. You don't need the new initiative cards and things for it because they are just the same. Right. So we'll have to figure out how to do that and have it make sense to print a smaller card deck. And so we're not exactly sure on how to do it. We're thinking about it right now, but I think we can come up with a nice solution for a smaller card deck for the Bitter Reach.
Are there going to be any sort of new rules or sort of tweaks to any of the rules to reflect the environment or the location?
Yes, some. I mean, definitely. I mean, the core, like for example, the travel rules is something that you'll be using a lot in the Bitter Reach as well. But there's going to be changes to it. We're working on them right now. I mean, one thing, it's just fairly minor, but I think it's quite important to get the feel right, and that's you have the resource dice in the core game, where you need to eat, drink water. You have for arrows and torches, and those they kind of show their. You need to keep track of that. And you have a die rating to sort of keep track on how much of those resources that you carry around with you. What we're adding now is basically when you make camp or stuff like that, you will need to spend your torch rating in order to keep warm. So keeping warm will be something that you need some kind of fuel to do that. And if you run out of your torches or your fuel, but every time you make camp, you'll have to sort of roll one of the resource dice for the torches or for the fuel. So that's going to be a key resource, and that's not the case in the normal Forbidden Lands. But here, having fuel to make a fire is going to be key. And if your fuel runs out, you might have to burn, I don't know, clothes. You can actually burn anything, that you can possibly burn to keep warm is going to be important. Yeah, possibly if you need to, whatever.
Wow.
And if you don't have that at all, then you won't be able to make camp, and you'll suffer the effects of cold. So that's one thing that you'll need to have stuff to make fire from. That's going to be a key thing. Yeah. The other thing that we're adding is there will be different terrain types. I mean, in the core Forbidden Lands, you have 10 different terrain types in the map. Here it's going to be pretty much around the same number, but different terrain types. We'll also add completely new tables for mishaps. When you lead the way or you make camp, all of these things, there is a mishap table in the core game. If you fail at leading the way, you could lead your party into a bad place. And that we're going to have new tables that will reflect the environment. So that's all it's the same system, but the flavor and the effects is going to be different.
Nice.
And we're also adding a way to actually go down and travel under the ice. So you can travel on top of this. You can also find crevices and go down and actually make your way. It's risky because it moves. The ice moves. So if you go down under the ice and try to walk there, you suffer the risk of being shut in or crushed or whatever. But you can also find treasure down there. So it's kind of a risk-reward situation. But that's also something that we're adding rules and a structure for.
Are you going to add a talent of igloo builder?
Yeah, we probably will. Yeah.
Nice. Phil asks, how about some removable stickers that can be added to the cloth maps?
Well, that's nice. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, if you can find stickers for the cloth map, yeah, maybe. I think mainly the idea is the cloth map is something you might hang on your wall or use, whereas you still have the paper map to actually put stickers on and stuff. But sure, we'll see.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't know. Let's see here. Do we have any other? I think we're pretty well caught up on the questions at this point. People's very excited about these new survival changes and the Arctic environment changes to Forbidden Lands. Everybody's very, very excited about playing Forbidden Lands in a whole new way, which is always awesome.
I always find it interesting with Swedes that you think you do a landscape that will be a desert, rather than just wallow in the cold even more.
Yeah. Well, you stick to what you know.
Yeah. Fair point. Yeah.
So we've covered pretty much is there anything else, Dave? Is there any other things you want to talk about with Forbidden Land? That's
the only other thing I was just going to very briefly mention was I noticed that one of the adventure sites, Thomas, from the stretch goals is called Hope's Last Rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that
yeah.
Wow. That sounds familiar.
It does, huh? Yeah. Actually, that's a bit of a coincidence, but I tweaked it to make it less of a coincidence. That was actually it's actually a long and strange and weird story, but it's Magnus Setter who's doing the writing. He came up with that, and his name was Hope's Last Sanctuary, I think. Okay. And that was actually a reference to a much older scenario that he wrote back in the 80s or 90s that has nothing to do with anything that you're referring to. And of course, when I saw that, it's like, this is interesting. And then I just tweaked it a little bit. I wanted a bit of a shorter name, so I changed it to Hope's Last Rest. And of course, that's pretty much the same title as for your demo scenario for the Alien RPG that takes place in Hadley's Hope. So I thought it was a bit of a fun in-joke as well to bring that reference in there.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. We'll talk about Alien here in just a little bit. So if anybody's tuning in for that, I do have some questions for Thomas on that.
Sure.
Let's see here. We're getting more questions about Forbidden Lands. Matthias asks, are there new monsters? Can't have an ice world without a frost dragon, can't we?
Yeah, we discussed that yesterday actually, and yeah, there will be a number of more monsters. We're not exactly sure how many, so we're looking at that right now. At least 4 or 5, maybe more. It could become a stretch goal. We'll see exactly, depending on. We have some more ideas of what we could do, and this is also really cool because we're talking to Alvaro Tapia, who's doing all of the art for the Bitter Reach, and it's fun. I mean, for the core game, of course, we used. It was partly built on the old art by Niels Gulliksson, which is a really cool retro feel because it's actually loaded from the 80s. Whereas now, with the Bitter Reach, we're building something visually new because we already sort of that art that we had for the core game is already used, and there was some new pieces by Niels as well. But going forward and for the Bitter Reach, we're mostly working with Alvaro. And that's a lot of fun to sort of, because now it becomes much more of a process where we discuss how things should look and how that would. So we doing the more of the work from the ground up where it comes to visual stuff, and also discussing monsters and bringing new monsters into the game. That's also we're talking a lot with him because having cool monsters, they need to look awesome as well. So it's sort of a very much a cooperation with him where it comes to monsters, and Magnus as well, of course.
So it's something we hadn't covered, which I seem to mention every single time I talk to you or Nils or anyone about your games, is just how good the artwork is, and how excellent. You just keep coming up with, new artists for your games who are, as good as the artists you've got already. It's remarkable, really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we always feel is really key. I mean, as I mentioned when we talked about production values, that of course the content, the text is the most important thing for the game to be good and playable. But I think to get it to that point, you really need to have the whole package. You need to have the art, the graphic design, the production values, and all of that come together. I think you cannot just sort of focus on one. It needs to all really be there, and to get someone interested enough to actually read all of the text, you probably need great art and graphic design, and then they discover the world and can dig into it and actually read all of that text that you had. If you only have great text, you might have a problem not enough people actually getting to the point where they actually read that text. So it's all, for us, really key to have all of those things come together.
Sure, absolutely.
And in this particular game, it's also a bit of an interesting and fun challenge. But we have 2 fantasy games now since we joined forces with Team Jan Ringen. So we have Symbaroum and we have Forbidden Lands, and that's interesting. But that's also one of the things we're doing because they're quite different, and also where it comes to art style, that's also a way we want to emphasize that they are really different. Whereas the Symbaroum art is Martin Grip, the same artist who's doing Alien, and he's got his very cool, very particular style, very moody. It's color art. It's like a modern take on fantasy. Whereas for the Forbidden Lands, it's more of a retro feel. So it's done. I mean, Alvaro, I think he's the only artist that we work with who works with a pen and paper. He does not do his work digitally. He's actually doing this with a pen and paper. So there's, and you get so it's a black and white, gritty, old school feel to that, and that comes out of the way he works. So it's got a visually a very different feel than Symbaroum, which is kind of a good idea, I think, since we want to keep those 2 different and separate and unique in their own ways.
Absolutely. We do have a question: are there any links between Raven's Purge and Bitter Reach? Are they going to have anything that ties?
Yes, I wouldn't want to get too far into that because that's kind of spoiler territory.
Sure,
but you might run into some familiar faces. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So yeah, that's I think we're caught up at this point with. Phil says he wants a Martin Grip art book.
Well, that's actually, I talked to him yesterday or the day before about that. Yeah, it might happen. It might happen. Yeah, we want to do it. He's a humble guy, Martin, so we'll have to talk him into it. But yeah, I think it's a good idea.
I remember talking to him when I first met him a couple of years ago about how great his artwork was, and I was commenting on the moody, sort of shady backgrounds, and it's all like sort of misty and murky. And he said, "Oh, I just do that because it saves me drawing all the detail in the background."
Exactly. Yeah,
but it works. I mean,
it does work. I think that's one of the sort of. I mean, one of the things Martin does really well is that it's not all. I mean, you couldn't have a piece of art that's all murky and misty, but he captures some part of the image that is crystal clear and that kind of focuses attention. But then the rest of the piece can be quite shrouded in mystery, and I think that works really well because it gives you a lot of room for your imagination. It draws your eye in, but then also leaves something to be imagined. And I think that's perfect for role-playing illustrations, because that's so important that it doesn't show you every single detail, because it needs to leave enough room for you to fill in the blanks and make that world your own. And I think his art style just does that perfectly.
Yeah,
absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. So let's move on for a little bit. We'll go back to there's a couple questions, and Phil's got some questions in here that I'll save towards the end. I'm not ignoring them, Phil. We'll get to that question those questions that you just asked. Let's talk about the other hot project that you've got going on right now is Alien. which the pre-orders have closed, but you're working on that. Let's talk. You want to give us a little update on
Sure. Right now we're kind of in a difficult spot because it's we're done basically. Everything is done. The books are done. It's all in the hands of, I think we have 5 different printers that are doing the books, the GM screen, the dice, the card deck, so now we're kind of just praying and hoping and nagging them a lot, just to get updates from them where things are going, if they're going to finish in time, and not just producing the stuff, but also getting it in time to our 2 warehouses. There's one in the US and one in the UK. And then there is Brexit, and there is like Trump and customs, and so now that's where my sort of main focus is, just making sure everything ends up where it should go. And where it comes to like the actual game design, where the core stuff that's coming out now in December, it's all done. So actually now we're moving quickly into doing expansions. So we actually have started work on the 2 first modules for the game. So that's what we're doing right now, is it's getting into that thing. So that's where things stand right now, I guess.
Excellent. Let's so the preview pages that you've sent out to folks that have pre-ordered the books, the book has been, they're amazing. I'm going to tell you right now, it's I can't wait to get these books in my hands. Or the book in my hands. I might have ordered more than one. I'm gonna.
No, it's been great. I mean, we had that cinematic starter kit with the scenario out in May, so and that's so great to see. That, I mean, we obviously play tested it before that point, but to get it out there now, since we started the pre-order in end of May and it finished in the middle of August, so for quite a long time, people have gotten this in their hands and played it a lot, and we got a lot of reports. We also played it at Gen Con, and you played it at the UK Game Expo, and it's just getting all that feedback has been fantastic. So that we're fairly confident that we have a good game on our hands by now, just judging from the feedback that we got on that starter PDF.
Nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful, and it's not even like, you say it's a starter PDF, but it's like how many pages? I forget.
That one was 168.
Yeah, it's not it's like almost, it's pretty much a full book.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and the fact that you had that ready to go like day one, like as soon as folks pre-ordered the game, it was genius. It was great, and I think that you've set the bar for folks that want to pre-order RPGs, because that was really, really cool.
It was interesting. It was a bit of an experiment because we, for different reasons, we didn't kickstart Alien. So we needed to find a different way to do this, and we decided to go with a more like a regular pre-order, but then that has some difference. So we set up this website, but we also decided that we felt we needed to have something solid, playable there from day one, so people actually feel that it makes sense to take part in this. Because not only, I mean, pre-orders and Kickstarters are nice, but I think one of the key things you get from that is the community building, to get people involved, to get people interested, and also to get people to actually play test and feedback. And we were a bit afraid that we don't do a Kickstarter, we would lose all that. But I think that pre-order did a pretty good job at achieving the same kind of thing.
Nice. And putting out the starter PDF has just built such a lot of momentum behind the game over the last few months. As Doug said, it was a really, really good move.
As a marketing, just from a marketing perspective, it was brilliant. It was awesome. I can't praise you enough on that.
So tune in next time to the next episode of the Free League Fan Club.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just being quiet here. I'm not sure.
That's kind of what happens on this show. It's just Doug.
I wanted to find something bad to say,
But I would say though, Dave, that you and the other people at Gen Con who demoed the game, you also done a great job at getting the word out and getting people excited about it, because both the UK Game Expo thing and the Gen Con games that we had there was a great way to get a lot of attention and got hype for the game. So that was cool.
Speaking
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Speaking of building hype, you are going to be at PAX Unplugged for the first time this December.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. We were not sure about doing that. I've never been to PAX Unplugged before. I've never been to Philadelphia, so that's going to be interesting.
Well, I'll have to show you around.
Yeah, you should do that.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's going to be cool. And the reason we did that was that, I mean, PAX Unplugged was on the list of shows that we might do. I mean, we've done Gen Con and UK Game Expo and Essen. And those are the three we've been doing so far, but we want to do some more in the US, and PAX Unplugged was kind of on the list of what to do beyond Gen Con. But then also what's kind of made us pull the trigger this time is that we the timing is like perfect, because we're releasing Alien around early December, and this is December 6th to 8th is PAX Unplugged. So we just felt like it would be cool to actually do the release at an event, so you can actually do a physical thing of it. So yeah, we bounced around some ideas and we decided to go there. So now we're going. Yeah, and that's going to be like a pre-release. The official release date is December 10. So it's like a release a couple of days before. Of course, if people pre-ordered it, it should ship before that day, and hopefully also arrive before that day. But there's also an option, if you can come by PAX Unplugged, you can pick up your copy there as well. So that's possible.
I might have to take you up on that. But maybe, then it just takes up so much space in my luggage, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
are you complaining, Doug?
No. I'm just saying, like, I've got limited amount of space.
Yeah, there's that.
When I come back from these conventions, I usually have a haul of games anyway. I have to kind of smuggle it into the house.
Yeah.
You should be like one of those people who goes to these conventions with a giant suitcase on wheels that's empty at the start and full at the finish.
I'm not saying I'm not saying that I'm not going to do that. This that's definitely a possibility. It'll be just full of alien RPG stuff. Is pretty much more than likely.
Yeah.
So,
and also I might mention we're gonna have I'll be there, of course, but also Drew Gaska, who did the setting work and wrote the chariot scenario. He's going to be there and be able to sign the book and stuff. And we're working right now on having some nice activities. I don't want to get into details because it's not nailed down, but it's probably going to be fun to hang around our booth. And we might have some Q&As and some other activities as well beyond just having the game available. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
You might also see this guy.
Yes.
I mean,
you'll be around, won't you?
Yeah, but I'm not the major draw. Everybody can just.
So yeah, I mean, that's going to be a lot of fun, and I never, to see you in person, and yeah, it's going to be great.
It'll be just disappointment, Thomas. I'm just excited. Right from this down, this is not. Yeah. Just
we were talking about imagination earlier, Doug, and you've just fired mine up in totally the wrong way.
Oh man, no, I'm really excited. I love everything that you guys are doing, and I'm glad that we can help get the word out about Free League and get more folks interested in all the great stuff that you're doing. Let's also talk about you talked about it a little bit, but let's talk about the Symbar. You have any updates on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, the way we do things, we have most of the time like one Kickstarter that's not yet shipped, when we do another one. We try to not stack too many on top of each other because that gets messy, but there is usually, like, because just the way game design works and it takes time to finish and print stuff, that's usually the case. So now, of course, we had the Symbaroum Kickstarter for the Mother of Darkness expansion that was back in March, and that's shipping this fall. So that's coming as well, probably around the same time as Alien, a little bit before, maybe November. So that's on time, basically, and it's right now in the final stages of layout. So it's going to print soon. It should just be a matter of a few weeks. I know they're working really hard on that right now, particularly Christian, who does our graphic design and layout. That's what he's doing all around the clock, is doing the layout for Symbaroum. So yeah, that's on track. So it's just a matter of finishing it up and printing it and shipping it. So it's pretty much on track. Yeah.
Excellent. Now I'm going to go back to Phil's question, because these are some things that have been leaked already. Any news on Vaesen?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Vaesen.
Vaesen.
Yeah.
Is that how it is? I don't know how.
Yeah, it's
Totally. I
Vaesen.
mispronounce things all the
That's
time.
fine. That's fine. It's Vaesen. I guess it's that, and we're going with that for in English as well. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but I think it'll work in the end.
I mean,
that's we're working on that. It's never been. We haven't officially announced it, but it's been unofficially announced a couple of times. So it's something that it's out there. It's an RPG based on Nordic folklore. It's a horror game set in the mid 19th century in something we call the Mythic North. It's kind of a not Scandinavia, but not really. It's kind of a mythic version, the Sleepy Hollow version of 19th century Scandinavia, I guess.
Okay.
A lot of dark forests and strange creatures in the night. And it's we've been working on this for a very long time. It's actually based on, you might see a trend here, but it's actually started out as based on an art book done by a guy called Johan Egerkrans, who does amazing art. And he's a good friend. And he'd released an art book called Vaesen as well. I think it was a couple of years ago now. And we have discussed turning that into an RPG for quite some time. And now it's finally happening. I can't give you any dates or anything right now, but it's we're deep into that as well. So
excellent.
We should have news in the next couple, at least during the fall. There will definitely be news on that.
Cool. I'm presuming that's a Year Zero engine, Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. It's actually written by Nils Hintze, who did Tales from the Loop.
Cool.
So that's rules wise, it's still based just like Tales was based on the Year Zero engine. It's kind of Nils's take on the Year Zero engine in Tales and also in Vaesen. So there are some differences, but yeah, it's the Year Zero engine. It's what we're going with for I guess most of our games at this point.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Also, Phil asks, what about Mutant Hindenburg in English?
Yes, that's another project that we kickstarted a while ago, and we're also working on that right now. It's a lot of projects.
Yeah.
So far, it's a game in the Mutant Year Zero universe. So far, it's one of the few games, actually the only game that we're working on right now that we're not planning an English translation for at the moment. And the reason is long and complicated, but I guess the short answer is that Mutant Year Zero is a prequel to an older game that was released back in the 1980s that was just called Mutant. And that was released in 1984. That was my first RPG. That was more of a steampunk, like 18th century post-apocalyptic world. It was not like Year Zero that's very close to the apocalypse. It was a world that's a bit more, that sort of recovered a bit more. So it's more like a Wild West 18th century, 19th century kind of post-apocalyptic style of a world. And that game came out. It was played a lot back then, and then of course it went away. But then Jan Ringen, actually the first incarnation of Jan Ringen, the guys who did Symbaroum, they did a version of Mutant in their day that was released like 2003, I think, and it lived for a number of years. And then they went out of business, and then we came along and we did Mutant Year Zero. That was a prequel game to those older Mutant games. So a lot of stuff that's actually in Mutant Year Zero is actually a lot of like Easter eggs that actually refer to stuff in those older games that you would never know if you hadn't played those old Swedish games. So they're kind of pointless for the international audience, but anyway, they're in there. But the thing is that Mutant Hindenburg is an old project that we came up with. I think it's like 4 or 5 years ago now, early on, that set after the old game. So it's kind of, if you have the old original Mutant in the middle, you have Mutant Year Zero, a prequel, and then you have Mutant Hindenburg, which is a sequel to the. So for the international audience, it would be very strange because you would only have the prequel and the sequel and not the one in the original in the middle. It would kind of make it would be very hard to explain how you would go from Mutant Year Zero to Mutant Hindenburg, because you would miss a big step in between. So we'll see. Of course, it can be done. It's just a matter of framing it right. You can definitely, but it would probably feel like hard to imagine how Mutant Hindenburg and Mutant Year Zero would actually fit in the same universe. You kind of you have a missing link there. That would be a bit of a problem if you did it in English. So that's why we haven't discussed, or the plan is not to do it in English, but could happen down the line. Yeah.
And that was the short answer.
That was the short answer. Yeah. Exactly.
Very clear there. Very clear.
Yeah.
One thing that I got a few months ago was the Call of Cthulhu illustrated book that you published this year.
Yeah, that is excellent. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And one of the stretch goals for that, if I don't if I'm recalling correctly, was a Cthulhu kind of RPG.
Yeah, you're seeing a trend here, maybe. Yeah. Yes, and that's something. I mean, it's like probably going to be then if you have Tales from the Loop and Things on the Flood and Vaesen and now the Cthulhu RPG, of course. Turning art books into role-playing games is the thing. It's a bit of a trend. We have to stop doing that now. It's too much, but and I think it makes sense. It's a bit of a different situation now also, because now since we joined forces with Young Ring and we actually have an in-house artist, which was not the case before. So more before than now, we were always on the lookout for great artists and great art. So that was one of the reasons we actually did that kind of stuff. And also we felt that the Tales from the Loop game turned out so well. So of course we looked around for, okay, so can we do this with someone else as well? And that in that kind of context, both Vaesen and the Cthulhu our RPG came up. But since then, we're still very early on for the Cthulhu RPG, and it's of course a tricky field to get into because there are so many Cthulhu RPGs out there already of all shapes and sizes. So of course you get the question, okay, so what exactly could we contribute to this very crowded field that's already, so there's so many great games, not just Call of Cthulhu obviously, but also a bunch of other ones. So what exactly would we bring to the table? So we've had a lot of discussions, and we have at least to our own opinion, a pretty good answer to that question. And it's going to be a couple of different things that will make this game stand out and be, I think, a worthwhile. If you're at all interested in Cthulhu mythos and Lovecraft stories and role playing, I think you'd be very interested in this game. But I'll need to wait a bit before getting into too much detail.
That's fine.
What I can say is that we're planning 2 game modes, kind of like in Alien, where one is a short story mode, or not. We're not calling it cinematic mode for reasons that I think makes sense, but a short story mode that's very one-shot focused, where you don't need to consider campaign play, so you can really put the story, you can go wherever the story takes you, you can truly go mad and die, you don't have to worry about your character living on to the next session. So kind of like cinematic mode in the Alien RPG, but then we're also working on a campaign mode that what we're trying to do is bring some of that modular way of building campaigns that we have in other games into a Cthulhu setting. But so there's going to be a lot of stuff there, but probably you'll have to wait until next year until we can reveal that much more about it, because it's still very early days.
Sure. Yeah. Eric Gustafson says you should call it insanity mode.
Yeah, yeah, why not? That's one of the things we're doing actually with the game, is that, of course, there are different mechanics in lots of different games, but what we want to do with the insanity mechanic is that we want it to be not just like descent into madness being a number and then you're out, but instead kind of descent into madness should be something that can be cool and fun to actually role play. So that's something we're working on.
Exciting.
Eric also says whenever a new art book comes out, I'm going to send it to Free League.
Good, they should. Yeah.
I think that's a great
because we're doing that as well. I mean, core role-playing games is of course what we do mainly, and some board games, but also art books. I mean, Simon Stollenhag's art books we're publishing, and the Cthulhu art books. I mean, that started out as the Kickstarter for the Francois Baranger's the Call of Cthulhu, the illustrated art book. So we're definitely on the lookout for more art book projects as well.
Speaking of board games, Crusader Kings launched this year and released, and how's that been so far? That's your first like foray into the board game kind of.
Yeah, the first serious one. We've done smaller stuff before, but yeah, definitely the first big board game, and that's been fantastic. It's also been quite a bit of a learning experience. I think the reception of the game has been good, but quite mixed. There's quite a few people who really like the game, and there are some who hate it. And I think that's always interesting because it takes a while because you sort of have to figure out why. And it's I think what's become kind of clear is that we a little bit underestimated the difference, because we've been used to working with role-playing games and the role-playing crowd, and we know them. The role-playing crowd quite well because we're deep into that field ourselves. We kind of know our audience very, very well. At least that's my experience. And of course, we're board gamers as well, and we know that field also, but we haven't actually released a major board game before. And also, since this was based on Crusader Kings, which is a pretty big computer game with a very strong community, that yes, I was familiar with it because I used to work at Paradox, but we're not as familiar with that community as we are with the role players. We kind of were. I think we underestimated that we were moving into a new community whereas for role-playing games, quite a few people, at least a few people, know freely. They know us. They know we make pretty decent games. They know our legacy. They know what we've done. We have a good relationship. They kind of, if we make a mistake, which that happens, they still know that okay, but that was just a mistake. We know you. We know what you can do. We know we like your games. Whereas in the board game, we don't have that at all. We're unknown, which basically means that if people feel that they don't trust us in the same way, at least as a generalization, we don't have that same level of trust, and so that was a big, I think, an experience that we learned quite a bit from, just how we probably could have it's more difficult than we expected, maybe, to just know our audience and know what they expected and wanted. I think it's a matter of expectations. That what we wanted to do with Crusader Kings was to focus a lot on the narrative aspects and the storytelling and the medieval drama stuff, because just like in the computer game, there's a strategy game, but there's also a lot of family and dynasty building and that stuff. And for the board game, we needed to simplify it and streamline it, because the computer game can be played for hundreds of hours in a single playthrough. The board game, we wanted to be playable in a single evening. So we needed to streamline stuff a lot, and we wanted to focus on not so much the strategy, the wars on the map, but more on the family building. And of course, there's always, even though we felt that we made that fairly clear, I think definitely some people would have wanted a more highly complex, detailed strategy game, and we gave them something that was a bit more social and more of a social game, much more of a narrative role-playing experience, and that's probably not what they were expecting and wanted. So we're definitely a situation where we learned a lot just from communicating with the audience and what they expected, and then I think we also learned quite a lot from that. I still think the game is doing well, and I really enjoy it, and it's the game we wanted to do, but it's definitely also a big learning experience.
Sure.
Well, I guess particularly with a franchise like that, you're going to have so many people who think they know it, or in their own head know it, that you're never going to please everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's kind of board gamers in general. I mean, there's no perfect game that everybody loves. There's just not, just like there's no perfect RPG that everybody loves. People love certain games and they like certain styles, and so you just have to try to make.
And then there's always also just stuff like basic stuff that we have learned a lot of, even though we brought on consultants and for just the pure production side of things, there's also stuff there that we learned. I mean, the core game is a very big box with there's so many like plastic miniatures and components and stuff, and just probably next time we might think a bit differently and not go quite as nuts on the component side, just stuff like that, also learning.
So what I heard was there's a next time.
There's definitely a next time.
Okay.
We're definitely working on more board games as well, of different sorts. I can't reveal anything at the moment, but we have a guy who does mostly that all the time, working on a new board game. So we'll be that's also something we want to save a bit before we can talk about it, but it should be in the next couple of months, for sure.
Excellent. I'm very excited to hear. All right. I think that's, we're a little over an hour. Like, I try to keep these, they never end. Who am I trying to kid? I want to thank Dave, and I want to thank Thomas for coming on and giving part of your Sunday, your weekend to come on the show.
Sure. Pleasure.
I want to thank everybody that tuned in and asked questions. And if you're just tuning in after the fact, thank you so much. Like I said, please feel free to hit that like button down below. That helps make this video a lot more viewable, come up in the search results. And also, hit that subscribe button, because we love this community on YouTube. We've been able to really kind of grow this really great community that folks just really have embraced what we do, and this year especially, and it's just a huge year of growth for VCG. So I can't thank everybody enough for being a part of that and helping us become what we've become, and I look forward to keep doing these, and I look forward to having Dave and Thomas on for the next project that Fria Ligan has, and I
cool.
love what you guys are doing. If folks want to know more about what you do, Dave, I'll let you go first. Where should folks go if they want to know more about Dave?
Yeah, well, come along and listen to us at theeffectpodcast.org. Effect spelt the Swedish way, with a K rather than a C. Or we're on Twitter at CoriolisCast, or our Coriolis Effect page on Facebook. We haven't been able to change those for some strange Facebook reason. So come along and have a chat anytime. We also have a Patreon, so you're more than welcome to join our small but growing community there.
Great community.
Yeah.
Great community. You guys are doing some great content for podcasting. It's
Thank you.
Really great. I'm excited to see you guys get into the RPG business, and helping Thomas with the Fria Ligan folks as well.
Yeah, me too.
Thomas, where can folks find more out about the Fria Ligan?
Well, there is always, right now they have the Kickstarter, of course. You can just go over there and search for The Bitter Reach and you'll find it. And then we have the website, freeleaguepublishing.com. You'll find it right there. And of course, on Facebook is always nice. You can follow us there. It's there. We're called the Swedish way, Fria Ligan. We actually tried to change that as well, but Facebook wouldn't let us. So I think that's the thing. Yeah.
There's some kind of rule that you're not allowed to change. I don't know. It doesn't make much sense to me, but
no, that's what it is. But so Fria Ligan on Facebook and Twitter, and you'll find us there.
Excellent. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this session. I want to thank everybody yet again. Remember, winning shouldn't be the only victory condition when you get to the table. We'll see you next time. Bye now.
Bye.